Welcome, everyone. I'm Susanna Chong, the Programs Manager and Head of Learning and Participation of Asia Art Archive. Thank you all of you for joining the 5th session of Life Lesson, Connecting Communities. Life Lesson is a series that we started earlier this year to inquire into models for education by artists. Each session addresses artists' unique teaching methodologies and experience. This series is part of AAA's ongoing research about the role of academic and alternative pedagogy in the development of modern and contemporary art in Asia and beyond. And Life Lesson is part of Asia Art Archive Learning and Participation Program, supported by SH Ho Foundation Limited and CK&K Ho Foundation. And it is a great pleasure for me to welcome Evelyna and Anurupa today. Both of them have been dedicated to community arts and education over the decades. Evelyna Liang, aka Crazy Granny, Yiwu Popo, is based in Hong Kong. She was trained as an artist. She has spearheaded several community projects. Starting in the 80s, the first one was Art in the Camp project in the Vietnamese detention camp in Hong Kong. She founded Art in Hospital to organize therapeutic arts projects for health workers, patients, and artists. Also started Art for All to use art to empower various communities. She trains social and community workers to use art as part of the community development. Our other speakers today, Anurupa Roy, is based in Delhi. She received training in the art of puppetry in India, Sweden, and Italy, looking at a different tradition of puppetry. She established at Kakata, a traveling puppet theater company that performs at international and Indian puppet performing arts and theater festival, and also traveled to many conflict sites. She has worked with youth and women across India, using puppets to create discussion around sexuality, the stigma around HIV, AIDS, gender, discrimination, and violence. With these two artists, educators, and community art facilitator here today, we are going to discuss how they see art as a medium of expression that can transcend social norms, class, and gender to build connectivity and solidarity. They will also discuss their recent project in response to the pandemic, talk about the power of art to bring hope, empathy, and possibilities to transform people's lives. So we are going to speak around an hour, then we will open up the discussion. So feel free to put your question in the Q&A box in Zoom, and I will going to ask the question for you at the end of the session. Okay, to start, I would like to, first of all, thank you once again to Anurupa and Evelyna. So to start, I think I would like both, I would like both of you to share one of the most influential lessons that you learned. I would like to start with asking Anurupa. So can you please share about how did you learn puppet? So as I know, you start learning puppet in India, then you also travel abroad like Sweden and Italy. But as I know, there is no formal puppet training in India in the past, right? So I'm curious, how did you learn? And also, what are some of the key lessons that you would like to share with us?
So when I started puppet theater, I was about 11 years old, and it started as a great interest and grew as a hobby. And when I decided I want to do this for the rest of my life, it was a shock to learn that there was no way to train. And it also became very clear that to be an artist and to sustain work and to create new things, a technical training, training in theory and history was very, very important. And I only had two possibilities. One was to work with a traditional master puppeteer, and the other was to seek puppet companies in India. And it became very clear that in both, not the complete picture. And so at this moment, I had to turn outside. I had to look for schools available, go to Sweden, which was a wonderful experience, to Dramatiska. But I must say that apart from technical training in a college, what one really learns is through one's mistakes. And that's what I learned about puppet theater, that it's the arts are very forgiving. You learn much more through failure than through success. You learn much more through your audience than you do through, what you do in a classroom. And I think technical training is very important, because you're learning plastic arts, and you're learning the craft. You're learning the science of the art form. But it is also so important to stay connected to people, the ones whose story you want to tell and the ones you want to tell the story to. And I think that's been one of my biggest life lessons. I feel it's very important to stay close to people, keep a ear to the ground, to hear the stories that are going around, to understand what is the job of the storyteller, what is the job of the artist who is sometimes society, sometimes asking questions. Yes, that's what I would say.
I'm just curious, where is this learning come from? So is there one particular example that taught you this, especially the thing you talk about, the failure and also the connection with audience? If you can say one learning example.
I think the key learning has been from children, because I started, when we started the company in 1997, we were working a lot with children. We had these great grand schemes and ideas. And sometimes we had the most fascinating idea, which we felt was the most fascinating, and children would reject it outright. They would be bored, they would walk out of the show. And it became very clear that for children, there is an authentic engagement that they're looking for. And that really makes your search become, what is that authentic engagement? What is it that holds an audience? What is it that binds an audience? Not special effects, not just technique. I think a great story, a story which has resonance. So this is one thing that I learned very, very quickly. Two is, I think some of the greatest inventions we have made, for example, the work we do with shadow puppets, we often learn from mistakes. I remember one of the things that I use a lot in shadow puppets is this blob of paint, which looks fantastic on a little light box, was something someone dropped on the light box by mistake. And you realize that there are no mistakes in the arts. There is just possibilities and probabilities, things that you hadn't thought of. So it's also what audiences tell you, what a child will tell you in the show. And suddenly you hadn't seen this in your own show, and it comes from an audience member. And I think those are very interesting. For me, those are accidents, and those are very important accidents that happen, which teach many things along the way.
Thank you, Anurupa. So just now you mentioned about the resonance with the audience, and also especially the mistake and this accident always is the best lesson that we could learn from. So let's hold on there and we will continue, but I would like to go to Evelyna. So Evelyna, as I know, as you share with us, not only a formal classroom that has taught you, in fact, there are many things that you experience in life that really influence you. So I'm just curious, in your earlier stage of the practice, so what gave you this interest to start working with the community? As I know, you're trained as an artist, and then I'm just curious, what was the spark? What inspired you? Yeah, if you can share.
Oh dear. What is the spark? The spark is I'm a naughty, mischievous failure in class. But that become my starting point of to be an artist. It is art, like, you know, in just doing crazy thing, crazy art, acting out. become my language to communicate. And I understand if I do not have art around me, I would be nobody. Nobody will notice me. And I use art as a form of way to express myself. And it is art itself that teach me how to do art. So it is a lesson that it comes from art itself. Without art, it is something like as a sparkling thing. It just lead me to different areas, different places, and then will take me to wherever I am and let me strike a light, and then the light is art itself and lead me to that place where I can create. Can
Yeah,
I?
like,
Is that?
yeah, it's so I think from what you said, which really tell us more about why you get start like why you study art and why you now become an artist. At the same time, I'm quite curious, like how, because basically you have spent a few decades to really focus on community art projects. So what, I mean, how was it begin? Because normally as a student at that time, they may focus on doing artwork like painting, drawing, sculpture, right? So what attract you and what make you start interested in the area of community art and then continue throughout your life afterwards?
Yes, like maybe 30 some years ago when I first started teaching at the university in Chinese U, and I heard from the news that, you know, there was a group of like Vietnamese refugees, poor people that drifted to Hong Kong, and they were all like not caught, I should not say that word, okay. They're all being pushed into a detention camp, and there's nothing there. Not even these, at the very beginning, there's even no school, and not to say any arts activities. When I read the news and I said, if I am that person that got drifted, that got put into that space, what will I be? A place with no color, no music, no funny action. We are dead people. Those will be dead people. So after reading the news, I told my student, I said, can we do something there as artists? Can we do something there? We are not wealthy people. We are not businessmen. We cannot donate like big machinery or food, but we can use our skill, our talent, our hands, our knowledge on art, and bring it into the camp, the detention camp, and do arts with those people. And this is how I all started.
Yeah,
I
and
bring
it's also,
art.
yeah. It's also connect with what you said when you grow up just now. You see the expressive way. I mean, how arts brighten your life basically, and then you imagine at that time when there is no such thing. What if you bring that there? So I think that is the starting point.
Exactly. It is like art give me life. And I want to use that to give other people their life, to be happy, to know that there's color in the world, not just plain cold, inhuman spaces or surrounding. And so I brought my student. We walked into the camp. I called up the police department and said that we are a group of students, we are artists, but we would like to do something. Can we do something? And it's a miracle that, yes, we did. We walked into the camp. We created murals. And then something changed. At the very beginning, it's like barbed wire. You can see all these steel panels. The floor is cement, and people got so bored, and then they got nothing to do, and they start fighting each other, and very hostile community. But once we walk in, we introduce art. We pick up young people, artists from the camp itself, from the refugees. We said, let's create, let's do something. What do we do is we just brought in like all this paint, all these brushes, and then said, you do it, you create, you know, draw. And then once they start drawing, miracle happens. The place is not a prison. It's not a detention camp anymore. It is a place where there's light, and it is a place where there's color, and it is also a place that they can dream and think that there's a world waiting for them to open their life that they can walk to and they can walk on. And this is, you can look at more of the murals that we did with the students. And May is my student there. And this other lady, very graceful lady, actually she first started doing stage design in France, but got persecuted back in Vietnam that time. But she created that beautiful scenery of the lady looking into the river, seeing that she is still beautiful. Or you can show more slides. And all this were like, they started to take photos, family portraits together in front of the murals. Even though they cannot go back to their town, but they are there. And that's me 30 years ago. I still look the same, right? Very young, yes.
Yeah.
Because art gave me my life to be happy and cheerful.
I think they start to touch to the point that art really transformative power, but this time at the very early time, it's already transformed the space. Since we're talking about life lesson, we talk about the lesson. So I'm just curious if there are any earlier lesson that you learned from any of these children or young people and different community. As I know you brought the project aboard as well. So is there any, maybe one key lesson you learned that you can share?
Yes, it's actually every time when I talk about it, it really hurts. It hurts. Like I have been working with a lot of different community of social service in Hong Kong. And at one time, I took a group of teenagers from Hong Kong. We went to Cambodia to like do service. And then we did, sort of like, singing, drama performance and doing little tiny artwork. And we visited like orphanage. We call it a children development center. So our group of teenagers went into this orphanage. We did singing with them, and then we do crazy act, and it seems to be everybody's very, very happy. And after the show, after like 1 hour, an hour and a half, we gave up like chocolate, biscuit to all the children there, and they were all so happy and say, "Thank you, Gogo, thank you, Jeje." Like, it's like big brother, big sister, thank you very much for visiting us, and thank you for the biscuits and sweets. And everybody was so excited. All the teenagers from Hong Kong were so excited when we got on the bus to go back to the hotel. They would tell, "Oh, this little boy sing to me, this little girl from the orphanage do." And then there was one young man. He's like very angry and he's like very mad. And then he started to farm them things. And I said, "What happened? What's the matter? You are not happy? You are not happy doing this type of service?" And he said, "Do you know what these children will be when you guys left? You only visit them for 1 hour and a half, and you think that you are a Messiah, that you have come and saved them from their hardship. Do you understand really?" And so I asked, what happened? What happened? Why are you behaving like this? You don't like what we did? You don't like to sing songs to children? And then he said, "Yiwu, I was an orphan in Hong Kong, and people have visited me exactly like what we did. But people actually, they only come once for 1 hour and a half. They never really, really care who I am. They only care about themselves, that they have the power, that they have the ability to give us biscuit and chocolate, and they think that they are good." When I listened to that, I suddenly realized if I am going to do project like this, if I'm going to take people into the orphanage centers, whatever places that we are going to visit, not just touch on an hour and think that we are doing miracle. We touch those people. No, we cannot do that. So from that time on, I promised to this young man, and I promised to myself, if I'm going to do any project in the future, it will have to be a project that I have to have connection with this community or this person, as long as my life can walk that path with them. And this is what I have been doing. I walk the path with the community that I have been helping, and I become that community, that person. I'm not an outsider. I am in with them together. And this is the lesson I learned from a young man from Hong Kong who's supposed to learn from us adults. But he's the one that gave me that lesson. And I always remember him.
Thank you, Evelyna. I think that point also resonate to what Anurupa said at the beginning. Like she said about the student. I mean, our target, our audience is the key person to teach us things sometimes by listening. At the same time, by making mistake or learning through the process is the best way to grow. The best lesson. So, thank you. Evelyna. So let's go back to Anurupa. So I'm just curious, just now Evelyna mentioned two things. One is about the spark. So I'm just curious about your spark, because as we know, puppetry is not something very normal, right? As a young people would like to pursue. So I'm just curious, what is your spark? While Evelyna talked about how delightful it is to when she had art in her life in earlier stage, then which really changed her life completely. So for you, what is the spark and what gives you the confidence that that can become your career in the earlier time?
Like I said, I started playing puppets when I was a child, and I remember the first puppet show that I ever saw. I was taken to a theater. I must have been 9 or 10, and I saw a show which was full of umbrellas, and all the umbrellas would come alive and become a tree and become an elephant and become different things. And here is a photograph, and it's lovely that this photograph is available. It was recreated again just a few years ago by the same puppeteer, Dadi Padanji. And when I was 9, that's many years ago, I had a similar experience. This was a tree with flowers, and suddenly umbrellas open up to become trees and flowers. And I realized that this magic world which I had in my head as a child actually existed in the puppet theater. So the thing with the puppet theater is it's a theater of dead material. Nothing is alive, nothing is breathing. And even the best puppeteer, when they're moving a puppet, what they move is not really living. The only place that the puppet lives is in the head of the audience. And I think this, for me, was a very powerful spark, because to understand that someone invests not just their imagination in a performance of puppets, but invests life in the puppet by looking at how I'm moving it, but believing that it's living, is very powerful for me. And I think it's very powerful for children. It's very powerful for adults. It's very powerful for transformative work. If you go to a very mundane place, a playground, or the street, and you place a puppet there, suddenly that mundane place becomes magical. It becomes a place of possibility, because something odd or strange or weird has entered it. And people are able to see or imagine something completely different from their normal life. And this, for me, is extremely powerful for the puppet theater.
Again, then that connects with what Evelyna said about the transforming the space, transforming the sites. Originally, without the art or for Evelyna may do more like mural or different kind of at the space, but for you is you put a puppet there and then they change the space.
Yeah.
And I'm also curious about how would you respond to Evelyna's talk about the idea of sustainability relationship, sustainable relationship with the with our audience. Yeah, I'm just curious about your thought about that.
I think it's the most key thing for the performing artist. I think it's the audience, of course, but it's also the community of performing artists. I think in Katkatha, if I look at our journey, I always look at our group as a community itself, because a lot of people came without training. A lot of people came because they were seeking something, and most people were seeking a group of like-minded people who wanted to work with other people and for other people. And I think it's we will turn 25 in about 2 years, and we realize that over 100 people have been in the company, lived here, worked here, gone away, started their own companies. And this journey has been remarkable. It has been sometimes a child we met in a workshop, a teenager we met in a school or university, someone who came and saw a performance would come and start living in our space, and the space would get energized and become dynamic because someone new has entered the space. So I think that is the whole idea behind a community. A community is people who bring things from their own set of skills, from their own ideas, their own passion. And I think every human being is a story that comes together in one space to give birth to something new. I hope you can see these. Yes, so this is the Katkatha core team. We have the much bigger company, which is many more members. If you can go to the next slide, Samantha. We are almost 20 or 30 sometimes. We also have our shows which address the community. We are in a village just outside New Delhi. I'm sitting there right now. This is one of our studio rooms. We have the entire village around there. The children from the village, they drop in on every Sunday. I mean, before the lockdown, they would drop in every Sunday, and they would be here in the space, reading books, creating puppets, doing performances. And I think I agree completely with Evelyn. It has to be not a one-off. It has to be a continuous process, because the arts themselves are an act of caring. They're an act of accepting, of extending, expanding, and it needs time to build up this community. But what is brilliant is that once it starts building up, it's infectious. The expansion is magical. If we could, Samantha, we could run through some of the images very quickly. Hello?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sam is going to run
maybe images very quickly.
running.
Yes, this is some of our art projects. This is us on the streets of New Delhi playing cricket, but with giant masks and invisible balls. This is us in east of India behind a truck, getting out of the truck, walking into the villages with almost 6,000-7,000 people watching the shows. This is in a community project in Buxton in England, building giant puppets with the grandparents and the grandchildren of the community. It's very important for us to use the public space. This is in Rajasthan, doing stories about water with the people. There's a lot of water scarcity, and using cardboard boxes with the children to build stories of water in Rajasthan. The next one, please. These are part of the big protests in New Delhi. This is a community, large groups of artists and women protesting against the bill that was passed. The next, please. And this is our space. This is the village. Now we are inside the space. The next, please. This is the children in the community that I'm talking about, painting together, eating together, doing picnics together. This is, we reclaimed the streets, which were really dirty and difficult to be in, and a little bit of paint, and suddenly the whole community was a new space, an outdoor museum. The next piece. These are some of our performances. Maybe the next, we can come back to these later. And so basically, for us, it's very important to marry what people are and their stories are, and what we do as puppeteers, and the community that we are together, to build something different each time. Because I agree with Evelyn that there's a longevity, and there's trust, which is so key. And I think the very basis of the community arts is building this relationship of trust with the community itself and with the people in the community. And after a while, it's really smooth because people bring in very generously once they know what the arts could become and what you could do together.
So thank you, Anurupa, talk about the trust. Evelyna, so I guess you also have a project which is really about women, which you have been doing in a period of time. Can you share your methodology and some of the key learning, which I feel there's connection with Anurupa's project?
Okay, I never have any theory or methodology. I am just crazy granny. Just walk into a community, you look at a child crying, you look at a woman crying, and you just reach out your hand, and that's it. Reach out and let them come to you.
That's a way to build trust.
Yeah, the trust will start doing. It's like if you cross your hand and you just look, they won't come to you. But you have to go in. You reach out with a big smile. And for me, my big smile is crazy smile. And they will come. They will just come. They immediately, like the hostility, the frightenness will disappear. What I have actually prepared to show you is I have been walking this path with the community for the past 14 years. And I first started is I went in, I got invited to go in and do sex education with a community with HIV positive community. And they asked me, can you come to this village of Henan and then do a project with this woman? And I said, okay, let's start to talk about who we are as women. So we have, so the next slide. And next slide. So I went in, the first time I sort of like I met them, we talk about who we are, our body as women, and we have to protect ourselves from this so-called HIV positive, blah, 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 blah. Okay, half of the community, half of the village actually are being infected. And we talk about that. And I asked them to make a door for themselves. Each one is a door. Each one is themselves. And all the clothing, all the, you can see from the slides is like all from their old clothing. The t-shirt or the shirt they wear, I asked them to don't throw away, but we can make it into something beautiful, something that people will appreciate. And after that workshop, I went back again, and I went back again, and then I started to do a big quilt with them. With each one of them, not just looking woman as a person only with breasts or only with a beautiful face, but women also have feeling. Can I have the next slide? Is I asked them who they are, and you can see actually from here, each one of them would draw a portrait. They can be sad, they can be happy, but they can decorate themselves with all this clothes, all these fabric, pieces of fabric that have been thrown out, that have been worn out, that nobody use. But they, with their hands, they can create something beautiful and make themselves beautiful. And they are together in a group. Each one of them still wear their own clothes from the shirts, but they have embroidery. They can embroider things together. And they're sitting together and they created the most beautiful sunflower. As a community, they said, I want to fly out. I want to fly out from this place. I said, okay, let's do this. So they do that. Can I have the next slide? And so you can see the group of ladies with their own face, each one of them happy and sad together in one face, but sitting together, doing artwork together, love each other, care for each other, take care of their children together, and they built their community. And they said, with our beautiful hands here, they can really actually fly out to other places because their artwork can fly out. And this is them. This is the second time I visit them. And I got trust. They trust me because I'm not teaching them. Actually, I'm very bad in embroidery or very bad in quilt making. I'm very bad in sewing. It is them. They are the one that can do it. And so I just give them idea and they are the one that actually made it happen. And this is maybe it's my methodology is everybody have their own ability. And as a facilitator, I am there to dig it out and say, hey, look, you can sew, you can draw, you can sing, you can dance, do it. But I will do it together with you, but you have to do it first. You show me the step, you show me the song, you show me how to stitch a flower. And I become their students in all these workshops. I am not a teacher, but I am their students because I went in and I learned from them. I never teach because actually I'm not good. If you ask my friends, you know that I'm very bad in stitching, but I can do stitch artwork because actually it is them, they do it, not me.
So again, it's going back to the point that is your way is just through asking them to teach you, to empower them, to the kind of minority groups that people think that they may even don't have enough self-confidence. It's through the process you empower their life. But I also know that the cloth that you use are the recycled cloth, and this is something that you seems like to use is to use some like rubbish, like something that people throw away to do your community work. So I'm curious about why you're repeatedly using this methodology.
Okay, to me is a lot of time with this type of like we will say underprivileged community. They always like they are being the most like looked down in a community. They are nobody. They are useless. They are just garbage. So with all this project, what I always want is I never use money to buy material. I always go around to people. I would say maybe for the upholstery company, I said that I'm doing a project with women and I'm trying to do quilt making or making some handy, sort of fabric artwork. Can you give them to me? So a lot of people understand me, will donate all this material to me. And like sample clothing, sample fabric. And then I gather all together. I will take it, at the very beginning, I will take it all the way to China, get on the plane and heavy luggage. And sometimes I will ask the local villagers, I said that, you have old clothes, right? You have old clothes that you don't want, but don't throw them away. we can make them again beautiful. And this maybe is my methodology. For something, maybe you look at them as useless. But once we want to create, to, to make something out of nothing, is use our brain, use our imagination, use our creativity, use our hand. We have the ability to do it. We can transform. We can transform garbage into something that is beautiful. And this is maybe my methodology. And it always works because people will look at something and say that, well, I couldn't believe, that piece of fabric was like discarded by, because it's a curtain, got torn down. And how can you make something a beautiful, I didn't bring it with me, all this crazy, like, jewelry that I use and think, but, and then they can, for this group of ladies in Henan, they actually sell those products too, and they bring in income, and they are not being looked down upon, not by their husband or the other village elders. They are something that can also bring in money to the village, to their home.
So on one hand, through the art project, they try you together with them to transform the forbidden. I mean, the thing that things have been thrown away, the cloth and the fabric, to be something useful and meaningful. I guess through them looking at the art, their lives change as well. They were a group that being really ignored, like being really ignored in the community, but they really can transform their life in a different way. Okay, thank you. Let's go to Anurupa. Anurupa, I guess in India in particular, your context, I think the social norms, gender, class is much strong in compared to, for example, Hong Kong or many other places. So I think just now talking about the transcendence power of art. So I'm sure in your project, I'm just curious because especially you bring your project not only in your own community, you bring it to the conflict zone in particular, and also you also work with women, work with different kind of sensitive topics. So I'm just curious, how was your experience? Is there anything you can share?
I think one of the key parts of this work in any community for that matter, but especially in conflict zones, is that people have understood their lives as, I can do nothing about this. Things are out of my hand, and there is a war raging, and there is, conflict, and there's no possibility to change this, and there's no possibility to change or transform my life. I think one of the things that the arts do is this ability to change the lens with which you see your own world and your own possibilities. Bigger problems, yes, probably the arts can't solve a war. They can't solve like the relationship between two warring armed factions. But what began to happen is, number one, understanding that the stories were same all around. People were not alone. To understand my story is also your story and her story and her story, I think was the beginning of the building of a community. The second thing is, this is again something that I love about the inanimate, about puppets, is you can say so much without saying anything. A puppet is a metaphor for life. So a woman who has had PTSD from violent surroundings is able to create a puppet of a recurring nightmare, and is able to look at her nightmare outside of her head, outside of her body, and is also able to transform the nightmare with just newspaper figures and say, this monster which chases me every night, oh, if this little paper figure turns around and looks at it, this monster is not so scary. This monster is not so big, not as big as in my dream. It's not really a monster, it's a bit of paper. I can tear it up, I can crush it, I can burn it. And these are now something that the arts-based technique is using very often. It's using it as a technique of healing. art-based theoreticians are using it across the world. But for us, it's both personal. So this personal transformation of understanding that what is inside your head, once it's realized outside, is possible to transform. The second is to understand that there is a larger community, and the thing uniting the community is the art itself. I can tell you my story non-verbally with just one little puppet. You will understand, I would understand, but not a word has to be exchanged. It's one of my favorite stories is I was working in the northeast of India with two tribes which have been fighting for years. And I remember that we were doing a workshop with two sets of teenagers from the two communities which don't talk to each other. They arrive at the yard of this church and we're doing a workshop. And the whole time, the two sets of children are looking at me, but not looking at each other. They're not going to talk to each other. And it's very difficult in a workshop to have 30 children who are 15 and not talking to 15 others. In 3 or 4 days, they managed to build two separate giant puppets. And the day that the puppets had to be moved, it was so heavy, it was so big. There was a 3 or 4 meter high puppet that the only two people who could lift it up were the tallest boys from the two different communities. There was no choice. The puppet had to move. They came together, they picked up the puppet, really not looking at each other still, glaring at each other. The puppet got up, started to dance, and suddenly they realized what had happened because people had stopped. We were out on the basketball field and everybody had stopped to look at this giant puppet. And the boys went into the flow of it and started to dance with the puppet and move with the puppet. This went on for a couple of more days. And in 7 days, these two boys had silently become friends. They had no choice. They had to together move one puppet. And I came away after about 15 days of the workshop. 6 months later, I heard that for the first time, a boy from this community had crossed the road to the other community to go to a birthday party. And it struck me that the arts have the power to go beyond your identity, your history, your community's identity, what language group you come from, what your gender is, what your tribe is, what your caste is, what your religion is. They become something else. Something else comes out, your skills, your value system as a human being, your interpersonal with another human being. And I think that's the kind of transformation the arts are capable of. And this works especially in the conflict zones beautifully. It works as almost like magic.
I think the key sentence I really like from you is art go beyond identity, and also it's helped to unfold. It's just take off the mask that people put on people's face, really can see the true values, skills, and really the personal side. Just like what Evelyna said, those women, they have all those skills, but they have those stigma. People think that they have stat disease, etc. But they are useful. I think as a community facilitators, what you guys do is really to bring that part of them out. And I have a side question. I find that maybe it's not, I'm in Hong Kong, but I seldom have chance to see that such a big puppet. I found that all the puppet that you do are very huge. I'm wondering, is this a tradition in India or is it because of the community art, so you try to make it big? So can you tell us a little bit about the puppet that you are making?
Actually, traditionally, Indian puppets are not very big. We have many, many traditions. We have living traditions, which are a few thousand years old. They are shadow puppets and, smaller string puppets and rod puppets. I think the whole idea of large puppets was, of course, in the community, it's visible and everybody can see it. It's also what it does to the one who watches it. When a giant puppet does something very simple and mundane, like even brush its teeth or eat some food, suddenly this act, which is so simple, highlighted like that, becomes so magical. And I think one realizes how magical our human existence is. Yes, we wake up every morning and have a cup of tea or coffee and we eat and we bathe and we go for a walk, we go to work, we come back home, we read the newspaper. very, very mundane acts. But the minute a puppet does it, I think people realize how special life is and how special these very little acts are. And I think for us to build these giant puppets is of course, to first get the attention of people, to get that, that moment of that an audience goes through, but then to constantly remind an audience of what a privilege it is to be alive, to be, a human, to have all these possibilities, even when it's not just the high points of life, but the day-to-day of life. And I think the puppet is a great, great reminder of that. And the giant puppet just sort of brings the entire focus to these small acts, but just blown up in size.
I just have one more question before we move to the next main part. And I also found that you also use a lot of tradition, because as I know your training also have a lot of tradition in terms of making. But at the same time, I saw those big puppet and also quite contemporary, and you also participate in contemporary show recently in visual art, even though you are a more in performance side. So can you talk just quickly about the tradition part that you put together? I know you have a video, we will show parallelly when you talk. Yeah.
Okay, so for traditional Indian puppetry is fascinating for me. It's as in the video, people will see that we have a very rich shadow tradition, dance tradition. In our training, in our work, we train a lot in the tradition, but when we perform, it's very contemporary, it's very modern, because we are retelling using the present politics, the present society, the present situation. This is a piece from the Mahabharata, which is a very old narrative from India. We use very traditional forms, like this dance form is Chhau, and we use Kalari Payattu, which is a martial art form. But when it's on stage with very new lights, even the language, the narrative, the rewriting of the text is to talk about this entire piece is about war, and it's a question asked on, is war ever justified? Is it needed? The consequences that war has is known to all of us. For this sequence, for example, is a 16-year-old boy who is killed in the war of the Mahabharata. And even today, there are soldiers who are young who are dying, and boys who are young who are dying in battle. So the Mahabharata asked it a few thousand years ago. We're still asking this question. And for me, I think tradition still resonates today. So it's like somebody said, you use yeast from yesterday to bake bread today. And that's a lot of what our practice is to use a lot of past technique for present application and retelling it in another way.
Thank you, Anurupa. So by using the tradition in a modern way. So I would like to take this forward to Evelyna. So, and also respond to the last part of our conversation, we would like to talk more about the pandemic. So I think unlike other form of art, like as a community artist and community art facilitator, both of you are really sensitive about building community. Just like many other scenario that you mentioned, like pandemic is something really unexpected to most of us here. So I know both of you has already done as a substantial project in the past few months. So talking about tradition, so I know Evelyna, you have been doing a Grandma, Grandpa Cook, which is a publication that you preserve a kind of the collection of stories and heritage story of this Grandma, Grandpa recipe. So again, it's kind of not recycle, but reuse some of this experience and then tell the next generation. So as I know that you have expanded this project during this pandemic time. So can you share with us why do you decide to develop the project further at this time for that Grandma Grandpa project, and what did you do and what are some of the key things you would like to share with us?
Oh yeah. Okay. Talking about sort of like in Hong Kong, everybody for the past maybe 6 months, everybody actually cook at home. A lot of time cook at home. And then I saw on Facebook, everybody is cooking, everybody is creating great recipe. But at one side, we are being sort of threatened by this like COVID-19. But do you know that at the same time, we're also facing another global sort of issues that is like we are running down, the world is running down on food supply. That means that there's a food shortage in the very, maybe 10 years time. No, we will be doing that. So what I'm promoting in this new sort of series of grandpa cook is we learn from our generation, further generation, maybe 2 generations, and how do we survive if there is not enough food around us. So the one that you're actually looking at is I didn't create it. This is created by one of my partner in this project, Grandpa Cook. She got the recipe from actually India, and it's curry. Can you see it? Everybody know that you love curry? Yeah, this is curry. But you know what this curry is made of? It's made of banana skin. And a lot of time in Hong Kong, we throw out banana skin, but we can make it into a gourmet dish. It's like curry, banana skin curry. It's beautiful. Or maybe can I show the next slide? If I have the shrimp, yes, this one. Okay, so this is a prawn shell and shrimp shell, and then papaya skin, and the hardest part of vegetable. Normally, when in a Chinese sort of like family, when you cook this, you normally throw this away because this is like waste. This is like food waste, you know, food scrap. Don't use it. But do you know that actually we use all this scrap, food scrap, and we can make it into a beautiful seafood soup stock. And it's actually, we learned, I didn't learn it from our like, you know, Chinese tradition. I learned it from the French bouillabaisse recipe, is they use all this. And then I make that, and then it become, can I see that noodle photo again? Yes. And this is how you can eat your noodle with that wasted shrimp shell, scrap, food scrap, like all that. But you can make it into beautiful soup base and you can eat it. And it's so beautiful. And this is my book. It's called Waste Not, Blasted Gourmet. And we use food that people maybe throw away, but we will use it and turn it into something beautiful, nutritious, and valuable for all of us to treasure. And this is my project for during this time. It's ongoing, and I'm still interviewing a lot of the elderly in town, 100 years old, 99 years old, about how they eat during wartime, how they eat during famine, and they may dig out, you know, grass, wild grass from the field, and actually those are all herbs. They are all beautiful, very nutritious herb, and we cook it, we try it, we ask nutrition, you know, what, how is it, and we make it into a book. So please wait. I am still working hard on it. And my husband is very mad at me because I always ask him to eat all this food scrap. And he said that, can you cook something fresh? But since I'm experimenting, you know, why not? You know, we have to experience first. And then we will be the people that run first and then give you ideas in the future.
Thank you, Evelyn. So basically, you try to connect the lack of food, the potential of food shortage, with some of the project ideas and extend that. Well, I think I'm going to ask Anurupa, but at the same time, I would like to open up the Q&A. Whoever have question, please leave the question there. But starting from the first question, that is the last project would like you to talk about. It's really the first question the audience asked. So I think we all understand that the seriousness of the pandemic situation in India. So this audience asked, where are you working now, and how has your work evolved or addressed the situation in the pandemic in terms of the content as well as logistics? So I think this is the best question to ask you for the project that you are doing, please.
So after the pandemic and the lockdown across the world and in India specifically, we're still sort of observing in the city, in New Delhi, the situation is still very, very bad. And we're trying to work with a lot of caution. This is the first time that I've stepped into my studio, so I'm really privileged to be sharing the space after 6 months with you and 3 other colleagues. So we moved to the space, we are living here, we walked in, sanitized ourselves, started staying here for a bit, living on masks, even inside, beginning to work on performances. But 6 months ago, when the lockdown happened, it became quite apparent pretty early that children weren't going to school, people weren't going to work, a lot of artists were out of work. And it was very important to connect the two. And we started immediately, I think within a week of the lockdown, we started working with children, with doing little workshops, doing little videos. So one of the first things I did is put together a video of what are the different puppet forms across the world, across India, and telling stories with it on Facebook, on Instagram. And a lot of people got back and suddenly said, you know, my child is curious about puppets. What do I do next? So we put together a series of workshops, and then we said, it's all very well to put together a workshop, but what is the child going to do? What material does the child have at home? And immediately we turned to paper. You know, there's always paper at home. There's always old cardboard boxes. You know, there's always trash. So I started to build paper puppets and in little boxes and started to tell stories. It was at that moment that in India there was the big exodus of workers from cities back to their villages because everything had come to a complete full stop. There was no work at all. And a lot of these people were walking from in front of my set of apartments, and I created a little performance called The Girl in the Pink Frock. Because of the big food crisis that had happened, people had no rations at home, no food while they were walking home. A lot of us set up community kitchens, and people were stopping at the kitchens to eat and then move on. During one of these community kitchen sessions, I met a girl in a pink frock. She had been walking with her family already for 24 hours. And they were going to walk for 4 more days to reach the village because all transportation had stopped. And this is a little story of the girl in the pink frock. I met her for half an hour. She ate some food. She told me her name, and her father said we were walking from that town, crossing Delhi, and we will go another 600 kilometers. And it suddenly struck me, why was she wearing her best pink frock for this walk? She was clearly in a party frock, and this entire performance is made about this very big, momentous moment in our history where so many millions of people walked home from the cities to the villages, and trying to imagine what they would have gone through carrying everything they owned, their children, their animals, whatever they had, and also wondering why this little child was wearing her favorite pink dress. Is it because it gave her strength during this terrible walk, or is it because in the story she thinks she's going to catch a bat, and she's going to, it's the bat which has been, making people disappear, and it's the pandemic from the child's point of view and what it has done to people and their lives and their livelihoods. And it's my personal connection to this girl who I met only for 20 minutes, and hoping that she reached home uh, among many thousands of people who were traveling. And while doing this performance and discovering paper theater, I think this whole world of theater has opened up to me, where I can just make drawings on a piece of paper. I can cut out those drawings, make buildings with old boxes, make anything with old boxes, and start to tell stories to people without much more than that. No giant puppets needed, though I love giant puppets. Nothing else needed but a little box full of characters and stories that I really want to tell people, stories that I really think people need to hear and never forget.
So thank you. You use use the unused use the recycled paper. Is a very simple tools to really tell the story in a way. You use the YouTube. I saw that many people share is use the YouTube to spread the story that you would like to reach. I think nowadays YouTube could be the best public space just like you bring the big puppet to the public sphere. Maybe the social media could also become the new public space especially during the pandemic. Well, thank you, Anurupa. So I would like to help another audience to ask the question. So this is a student from Hong Kong, and he really thank you very much for both of your work. And despite the community, our project seems really have this transcend power for social identity, but it's very often to be seen as being devalued by the general public. They think that this is maybe head in the cloud, like it's pretentious. So how would you react to this criticism? And how would you promote art to a more general public, especially in a more traditional society? I guess this question, I think I also asked you before, for example, social workers do their own way, right? They directly helping the people. So why do we need art? How would you answer to a general public? So why art is important and compared to a social worker do the help to the needy by themselves?
I think it's very difficult to answer this at the beginning of a process, and I tend to stay quiet. And when the process is halfway, I usually let the public in and ask them to join in the process. I think after that, they are quite convinced. So one of the things we do in our community theater here is we invite people for our open days, just where the children are doing their cooking and they've created their performances. We just invite people. We tell them nothing that, oh, these are people who don't have access to education, don't have nothing. It's just an invitation to come to a theater. And people will walk into a theater and they will watch everything and see everything and say, oh, this is fabulous. I had so much fun today. We've been doing this a lot with university students who are much more privileged. And at the end of the day, we tell them a little bit of the story. And that's when they're like, oh, but you mean these children don't go to school? And you mean a lot of them don't have access to books? You mean they're not artists? And they're not doing a course? And it's like, no, they live in the village. They just drop in on a Sunday and they just put this together because they've been doing this for a while. And I think no amount of words and actually convince people. They really have to experience these spaces to understand that that spaces just are, they start to exist, they start to have a life of their own. And I think what is very, very interesting is I think the resistance from traditional society is also because they're a bit afraid. They're a bit afraid if the world that they know is suddenly taken over by the unknown and chaos that the arts often seem like. You know, the arts seem like, oh my God, that's so much color. Oh my God, that has no lines and that's all unstructured. But I think every single human being actually deep down needs it. They need the freedom to express. Of course, they need structure, but they also need the other side. And I think the only way they would be convinced is if they experienced it firsthand with a community which is, living that in the moment. So I think that would be my way.
Thank you, Anurupa. Evelyna?
Uh, I actually I don't really know how to answer that because for the past actually 20, 25 years, I've been working with social worker and social service in Hong Kong and maybe even outside of Hong Kong. And it is for social worker, they always go into community, they try to solve problem. And with the community, they will always sit down and they start complaining about things that the government have been not good with them. So her neighbor is very bad, and this villagers is ignoring her requests. And this is what social worker have to deal with. But for artists, I walk in, but I have to work with social worker. So I will understand the problem first. I'll listen to the problem. And then we will gather the community together and say, shall we do something? Imagine if we want change. What will be the changes will be? And we make it into pictures. We make it into photos. We make it into drama. We make it into music. And then suddenly the community, the people that always complain, look at their own complaint through their own artwork. And then they suddenly realize, is it really complaint or can we really change it? If they can change it through their own creativities, then maybe they can really change it in reality. And this is the way an artist will walk in. But another way is I did a project with a group of fishermen in Hong Kong 5 years ago. They are all elderly fishermen. They were being abandoned by the Hong Kong government because from their harbor, because it used to moor around a harbor. But the Hong Kong government want to create a reservoir. And so all these elderly fishermen said that we lost our homeland, our harbor. Nobody remember us. Nobody remember what we have been we give up our own homeland for you Hong Kong people to use. So they complain and complain for 5 years. They always complain. And the social worker come to me and said, Evelyna, let's do something to help us. Instead of complaining, then they look at themselves as someone that is totally different. So I walk in and I said, what you guys can do? And this old gentleman said, all that I know is to knit the fishing net. And another lady who said, I know how to make salted fish. I said, good, let's make it into a performance using salted fish, fishing net. And yes, I changed the concept of fishing net and salted fish. I make a fashion show in the Heritage Museum in Hong Kong. And all these elderly, instead of knitting fishing net, they knit fashion. They knit outfit. And instead of making like salted fish, they will start cooking and showing people, this is how their livelihood. And then suddenly they start singing. And I said, what are you guys singing? They said, oh, we call it the ham shui go, it means salted water song. And I said, oh, we never know about it. Can you teach us? So they start to teach us how to knit the fishnet, how to sing the song. And then I create a drama and I make a video out of it. And then I show it to a lot of exhibitions. And now all these elderly fishermen and women, and they are so proud. Every time I walk in, they said that, oh, look at this, I knit this for you. And then they make it into a beautiful new outfit. So the empowerment is maybe an artist with a social worker is we take complaint again. Yes, we take in complaint, but we twist that complaint and said that, okay, this is our complaint. Let's look at it from another angle and let's see what happened. And if we saw something happen, and then we make that complaint into something else, we create another formation, another creation. And this is how I work with the community.
Thank you.
Break thing, twist thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's really bringing the community as part of the experience, as both of you said, and also transform the way they think and see things is really important. So I'm very conscious about time, but I really want to ask the last question, but I'm just wondering if each of you can just answer in one sentence as a conclusion of this talk. So this is the teachers who is teaching in one of the Hong Kong school. So in terms of school, what do you think, what are something that you think they should focus on in this time of pandemic? So it could be themes or area that you think in terms of students or as a teachers, you think they should focus on. So one thing, if you can answer in one sentence.
2 sentences?
2 sentences, yes.
When one confronts a wall, a barrier, a lot of people will look at it as something you cannot go through. But for me, I learned from the Vietnamese camp, when I see a wall, I see opportunities, and I can create my own creation through the barrier. So this is my answer.
Thank you. Anurupa, please.
I think this is a great moment to relook at the fairy tales, which always end with happily ever after. And today in the world, things are not happily ever after, but who knows what is tomorrow? And I think who knows what is tomorrow is a great ending for any story. And to start talking to children about uncertainty, possibility, and it's okay that we don't have all the answers as adults. I think that would be my key many sentences. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think this is a very generous gift to all the audience today. Like to be really, it's okay, and to for the unknown at the same time, whatever challenge, in fact, is a great opportunity for us to imagine the new possibility. And thank you very much for the very generous sharing from both Evelyna and Anurupa. And I also want to use this opportunity to thank my team, like Samantha, Samira, Oskar, Gabby, and Paco. If you are interested to think more about the communities, currently at Asia Art Archive, we have an exhibition around the festival in which women artists think about the idea of community. So if you are in Hong Kong, please come to see the show, and we will have a talk around the topic on the 17th of November as well. So please come to join us. And thank you all of you, and I hope you have a good evening. And for those who are from US, have a good morning. So thank you, Evelyna. Thank you, Anurupa. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.